as Tennyson said, the greatest ability with the English language since Shakespeare. It's a tragedy I have nothing to say. Well, this film, as you saw, is quite an astonishing story for someone that knows nothing about the power of music and how music could do this. I've mentioned this story to people, and they go, "Oh, come on! I mean, what kind of science is there behind this?" And they want to know the science behind it. And when I heard this story from Andrew and Wendy, you know, I took it in. I thought this was great. I'm just curious. Of course, I have to find out what the doctors have to say. And as you saw, both Dr. Carpe and Dr. McMillan completely concurred, as well as Joanne Lowy, the music therapist, that it's perfectly feasible to think that this is what brought Andrew back. And just sort of along the path of my search for answers about how music works, it's a perfect sort of, you know, miracle of music, as I say. Although, of course, it's not a miracle. It's just science, and it's just the way our brains work, which is very complex. And Marvin and Andrew know a lot about that. So if there are questions, we're happy to take them. Because we have the two of them there, I'm going to deflect most of the questions to them because they're our experts. If you want to know about how to make a film, you know, you can read a book. But they know about the subject. But of course I'll answer any questions. But having them here, I think, is a real opportunity because this is an astonishing reality that we came upon. So questions, please.
While we fill down here, you just raise your hand.
Yeah, in the back. Gentleman in the back, sir.
How long did it take you to recover from the moment you heard the music?
The coma lasted for 6 days. It was in the middle of the third day that the music happened. It was clear within, by the end of the music, you could see the stabilizing beginning. By that evening, I was out of the woods. The doctor said, out of the woods. Marvin had just gone off duty, so he wasn't there that day. He was there the first 2 days. Something I want to briefly make clear. The music saved my life in the sense that it allowed the doctors to do things that they couldn't have done in the first 3 days when I was extremely unstable. There were things they could have done. And I've done a lot of research. I'm writing a book, and one of the key people in the book is Marvin, is the critical care doctor. And so what the music does is it stabilizes you and then gives the doctors the chance to save you. If the doctors hadn't been there, the music would have made my dying more pleasant. I'll take a quick moment then I had 3 more days in the coma to slowly do the things they had to do, and they took me out. I quickly will acknowledge 2 people. The most important person in the film is the director, Josh Aronson. He's the only person who's in every second of that movie. Wendy and I and all of us thought he was just an absolute delight to work with. And he's a real pro. I told him at one point, I've been a musician 40 years. I've been a soloist and a band leader. And I have such a pleasure sometimes when I'm not the leader, when you have a leader who really knows what he's doing. It's so relaxing. So this is a great man, extraordinary artist. And I want to thank this gentleman here, Dr. Marvin McMillan, who is a great doctor. 5 years ago, he already had done 30 years experience in critical care. In doing the research for my book, I actually got to find out how sick I really was, which I didn't know for a long. All I knew in the beginning was, oh yeah, you were very, very, very sick. There was a 320-page progress notes report for my 10 days in the surgical intensive care unit. And a few months ago, Marvin interpreted a lot of it for me, and I can tell you right now that if this man hadn't been there the first 2 days, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. The degree of skill that was needed and the degree of experience that was needed was at the nth degree. So please give a very big round of applause to 2 extraordinary men.
Can we take another question? Just one more question? Or Marvin, you have something to say, I'm sorry.
Let me just comment on that because it's completely undeserved. 30 years of taking care of almost 30,000 patients, in the intensive care unit has taught me one very important thing. It's really the patient who heals. We don't save their lives. We buy them time to heal themselves out of the illness, and we have some pretty good tricks. But the thing that every intensive care unit director knows, we all have this awful experience of getting somebody through a critical illness and then getting into this meta-stable state where they haven't died, but we can't get them better. And I think that the impact of the healing environment, I personally believe that music therapy is a very, very important part of it for reasons you've now seen in the movie. It is absolutely a critical element, and people have suggested that our failure, when we look at patients who we get through the illness but who we can't get back to their functional life, people who are functional before they came to the ICU, half the time it's a failure of rehab and environmental stuff, not medicine. And so, yes, the medicine is important, but when you look at something that's responsible for half of the outcomes, you really can't discount its importance in a global sense.
Okay, here we got one right over here.
How is the music transmitted? Did they use earphones?
Maybe I'll say.
And also, was the music continual? Was it interrupted?
Are you talking about the music when I was a patient? For
Yes.
Me?
Yes.
My wife had as you saw in the film, my wife had my iPod. There wasn't a music therapist. It was in the summer, and there were no music therapists around. Nobody even thought about it. And she had my iPod, and a crucial part of the success of music and healing is to play people's favorite music, or music that people really respond to. Also, the instrument is very, very important. I am not a trained music therapist. I'm the only a title was created for me called resident visiting artist in that hospital. There's a visiting artist program where professional musicians want to do a nice thing. They play in the lobby, they play in the waiting room. Because of the unusual circumstances, I was allowed first by him, and then I had to go to Joanne Lowy and meet with her and play for her and get permission. I'm allowed to play at the bedsides. So in a critical care unit, about 80% of the people are, the term I use, which is not a medical term, are out. It could be coma, sedation, pain, whatever. There's no way that anybody's going to tell you what they like. So what you do as a critical care musician is you have to have a very wide repertoire. You really need to be a professional musician because you can't have music that's a whole term thumping around because it's agitating. People are used to professional recordings, TV, they're used to professional sound. And what I do is I watch the patient, especially their face, their hands and their feet, and I learned how to read the computer monitor of vital signs. And you have to, what a live musician can do is turn on a dime. A recording can't. It was just God's will, luck, whatever you want to call it, I don't care, that when they hit the first thing, they hit my ultimate favorite piece of music. Probably other pieces. I think there are things there that wouldn't have done the trick. So it's a wonderful opportunity for the right musician to get involved in critical care music. And by the way, your teachers are the patients, the doctors. I learned so much from him, the nurses. And well, I don't know if you want to talk about that. You were a patient there, but you can say that in a minute. But one thing Dr. Marvin McMillan told me in the first few months, he comes over to me and he goes, listen, if you really want to know what's going on with the patient, ask the nurses, because they're there all the time.
You're asking a key question. We had been working with the Landscape Channel for 5 or 6 years. My wife, Victoria, was involved with Live Music Now, which is the Yehudi Menuhin Trust in England, which is very interested in the dynamic between a musician and audience. We had young musicians in our music therapy program, and I think the critical message of what Andrew has done and the impact he's had is, first off, his prescription for music It's not random stuff with nice imagery. He's trying to understand the patient. Oh, you know, your mom was in Paris as a young woman, and he does a lovely version of the Villon Rose. So he looks for the patient, and you've got to remember, I'm experiencing here what it's like to be a concert musician. I can't see the audience. He's a cabaret musician. He can always see the audience. Part of his skill and his livelihood is connecting with the audience. He connects with a very different audience in the ICU, but as a musician, making that connection is one of the things that he does. So first off, there's a prescription, and second, he has a degree of empathy, both in terms of his pre-ICU career and his post-ICU career, that I think has been a very important part of his efficacy.
Here we go.
I was just curious, is this talking to the mic?
Is this even more successful with okay. Is this even more successful with children that have critical diseases?
Okay, answer that.
Yes.
We don't have children in the surgical intensive care unit. There is a NICU, which is neonatal intensive care unit, where they've had tremendous success, and in fact Joanne Lowy ran a years-long study that results were published on the front page of the New York Times last year of how powerful it is there. I can only answer you about neonatal, and I think the youngest person I've ever seen, maybe we see a 20-year-old every now and then, but I can give you a guess about what you're asking, and that is that the degree to which a person enjoys music or loves music is the degree to which it's more likely to help. Most people like music, a small percentage, maybe 10-15%, love music. And the difference there is tremendous. Most people like music, there's a small percentage that don't connect. I would imagine that from the entire age spectrum, it's probably about the same. And it's a very, very good question, and I'm going to actually look that up for my book, because you've now asked a question no one's asked me before. So thank you for that.
I think music probably begins when our mothers sing to us. I think it's perhaps the most primal and powerful aesthetic and emotional experience we have. And we do ask ourselves, what is the difference between the memory emotive element, something we love and that has one effect on our brain neuronal matrix, versus new music that we may also love the first time we hear it. So I do think that probably, we understand the pathways. Music comes into the center of our brain where the reticular activating system is through a very different route. It does not use the optical cortex. It's not processed frontally. So probably it is as important in a child or an infant because it's the first thing that they experience. And again, what would be fascinating in your question is music from the child's mother and father under guidance from the music therapist more effective than music from a professional musician, even one as sensitive and empathetic as Andrew?
If I can add to that also, I've filmed this woman, Joanne Lowy, and her staff in the neonatal intensive care unit at Beth Israel. And I can tell you a couple of things. What they use the music for specifically with the parents, that Joanne would be singing with the mother and father, and they would look for what Joanne calls kin songs, which is the songs that the mother was sung to and was in her, and that she cooed to the baby. So she would teach her to, Joanne would teach her to sing it in a certain way, a lullaby, very slowed down, and effectively be able to put the baby to sleep and relax the baby in her arms almost instantly with that kind of sound. I watched it happen, it was remarkable. And the second thing they do is the neonatal intensive care unit nurses will open the incubator and they'll chant and sing lullabies to the babies, and they bring their heart rates down almost immediately. I filmed it, I watched it happen, it was just remarkable. And just with sound, they could bring the heartbeats down of babies who have more rapid heartbeat. And their comment to your point about music being the earliest thing we hear, it's even before that, of course, it's the heartbeat of the mother. that we all have is the first sound of rhythm that we all experiences, and it's very universal, and that gives us the rhythm for everything in our lives. And the whoosh of blood, because they've done, they've taken recordings, and it's the whoosh, general whoosh of blood that you hear, that you would hear, and the heartbeat. Yeah. Other questions?
We have one right here.
It would be very interesting if in your health proxy that most people have, if you put this all together, in your health proxy, you could indicate the kind of music that you like.
Your
so
playlist.
That if you ever get into that kind of position.
Great idea. Great idea.
That should be a part of it.
Also, it's been found that with Parkinson's patients and Alzheimer's patients, that music is a wonderful therapy.
And they play specifically the music that that patient used to love.
Let me add quickly something that my primary care physician, after this all happened, told me on my second visit after it all happened that he made a special iPod for himself with everything.
In case of emergency, bring this iPod.
Literally, that iPod is set aside with a note of what to do.
After you innovate, you just put my iPod on.
What a great idea. I love this. I'm seeing a scene here.
Right here.
I think this may be very relevant to everyone here. My husband knew he was dying in the hospital, and he refused further surgery. And he told the physician, I want to go home, read the New York Times, be with my family, and listen to QXR. And the surgeon tried to persuade him for 50 minutes to have the surgery, and he refused. I took him home, he met with his family, he listened to QXR, and he read the New York Times, and one day later, he passed away. And for several years while he was ill, he read every day, and he listened to QXR for hours.
Yeah.
That's the power of music, the comfort that it can bring if you love to listen to music.
And also, of course, you bring up a whole vast topic of dying with dignity and all the things, I mean, to have quality of life in those last few days or last months or whatever. I went through precisely what you described with my mother 2 years ago, who told the doctors, no more intervention, I'm going home to be with my sons, and I'm going to listen to music, and I'm going to read the New York Times, same story. And we had 2 months with her instead of, maybe 3 months of hell in the hospital. So I mean, she preferred the 2 months.
Can I add something also to that? When I go into the SICU, I have a whole method that I do. There's nothing random at all. It took a while to figure it out. But one thing that will happen is, he's done it. I remember in my first year, I just set up in this sort of central spot, which I don't even use anymore. I just go to bedside, and he walks over to me and whispers into my ear, he says, bed 2, patient is dying. Go there right now. And I did. And in that particular one, actually, this person was in the last hour or so of his life. And his heart was 60 to 100 is normal, and he was at like 56 and 55. And I started playing, and within a few minutes I looked up and I saw it went up to 60, 62. And I had a moment of a kind of shock of saying, an ethical shock, of saying, am I doing the wrong thing? Am I prolonging something I shouldn't? And within a few more moments on intuition, I said, no, I'm helping this person have a better passing. And he was dying, but it was comforting. And so in the reverse triage of a critical care musician, if no one is dying, and dying is rare in SICU, you actually start with the sickest. That's why I start at the main computer monitor. I speak to the nurses and stuff. Find who's the sickest person. That's who you go to first. But if somebody's dying, that's who you go to first. And the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest grace a musician can ever have is to play for somebody in their last moments, especially in a surgical intensive care unit. So instead of the ventilator machine beeps, and doctors and nurses walking past and talking and all that noise, I'm playing a Bach chorale and similar music. And again, if I know something from the family, it could be Gershwin or whatever it is, and very gentle. And that is the thing that fills me with the deepest feeling of I'm doing something really, really good.
We have one here, and then we'll come to you people in the front.
I'd just like to say I have been active in the field of music with children for 30 years before I retired. And I use music actively in teaching in many ways. So in a sense, music itself is therapy. Music itself has that aspect, whether we put a title on it or not, because people feel good when they hear the music that they like. And anytime you feel good, you're healthier, you're better, you're happier. But I was a member of a very interesting organization, which I hope is still in existence, called Music, Medicine, and Health. And Dr. Matthew Lee was very active. He wrote several books on that topic. I'm sure if you look it up, you can still find it. He was in charge of a unit of people who had some mental disabilities and had other problems. He used music all the time, and he was very active in this group. We had international conferences in Europe where people were very active in this field. But music was always something that children love. It makes their life better, happier. It brings them up to a higher level that you can then work with them on some other subjects. So I'm all in favor of it. I think what you did was fabulous.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
There was a question up here, I think.
Somebody right here has been
She was first.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I was extremely impressed by the whole film, and I'm profoundly moved that you have the courage to go back where you were so sick and to give back in the way you do. I really congratulate you for that, because I think really most people, this would be an impossible task to put themselves back in the unit where they had, suffered and almost lost their life. I think it's really amazing, and you're to be congratulated.
Thank you very much for that. I want to tell you that at the end of the first month, one of my nurses, a guy named Wilberg, a great nurse, he was my favorite nurse because I was 40 pounds heavier than that. And Will was built like a football player. And he was the only nurse that could turn me by himself. And a wonderful guy, funny guy, at the end of the first month. And he's also very empathetic and very sensitive guy. And he comes up to me and says, is this traumatic for you to come back here and after what happened to you? And I said to him really absolutely the truth, that I said, this is the safest place in the world that I could ever be in, because it's the only place in the world that I know for a fact that I can drop dead and the next day have a nice lunch. That's verbatim.
First, I'd like to commend you for the wonderful work all three of you have done. I was also extremely impressed. I was wondering if you have been able to promote this idea to other critical care institutions in the United States, and also, I don't know how many other musicians would be able or willing to do the kind of thing that you do, but is this a possibility, or have you been in touch with other musicians in this area?
Yes, I have, and as I mentioned, I'm writing a book right now, and what the whole book leads to is exactly that. There is a field called music therapy, but what's being recognized now is that really the umbrella is called music and medicine. The music therapists are very important, and you are not a music therapist unless you're licensed and you're trained and so on and so forth. You do not use that term. The term for what I do, which is not official yet, and someday I really hope it becomes that, and there is a sense that it may, is called critical care musician. And the director of the Louis Armstrong Center for Music and Medicine, who you heard, Joanne Lowy, is one of the leading music therapists in the world. She's in the top 5 in the world easily. And the reason they created the term resident and visiting artist was to give an understanding of why I'm allowed to play at the bedsides. And Joanne and I are actually actively working on developing this whole concept of critical care musician as a title. And my dream is that you will actually have that eventually as part of music therapy and medical programs, where you actually have to get a degree in that. I'd like to be involved in the training in that. And my dearest wish is that the only official critical care musician in the world who didn't have to go to school for it is me. Because I don't want to do homework anymore.
We're going to take one last question before we ask you to play.
Can we do two? And I have a question, which I'd like to ask last.
Well, you go first.
Oh, I'll go first.
Actually, before we get to your question, we didn't get one
You have a
question.
You have a question too?
We're not done yet,
We
guys.
didn't
We
get
just
a
have one more
question.
question from the floor.
We didn't get a question about the science.
Well, that's,
of this.
I was going to do that.
Okay, so I'll let you ask.
Let me ask this question. Let me put it this way, and it's directed at you.
Okay.
People who have seen this film, that I've shown this film to, have said, I'd call them skeptical people,
Yeah.
have said to me, where's the science behind this? Are you saying, you making a proposition that people who are in a coma, if you play music that they like, that they're going to wake up? So obviously a scientific experiment would be you take a control group, you'd have 15 people in coma, you'd play music they like to see the results. How do I respond to them?
We set this up. I ran a NIH-funded research lab in stem cells and immunology for 20 years, so I have some reasonable scientific credibility. And my dear friend Joe Forte, who's a Renaissance art scholar and dean at Sarah Lawrence, absolutely refuses to believe in anything unless it's supported by science. And I keep reminding Joe, Joe, there's only one problem with contemporary science. We've figured all these things out. We're at the molecular level, we're at the cosmic level, etc. And there's only one little problem. We can't find 95% of the universe. So to people who have such a profound belief in science and don't think that there could be some link that is created or that there is some neurochemical relationship that this has, at the end of the day, it is a perfectly tenable hypothesis. We all would like to learn more about this. We would all like to refine the prescription. I would like to know whether vocal range instruments matter. I'd really like to know what choral does, whether choral can be more compelling than instruments. So yes, the science is suggestive, but it's certainly unproven in a scientific sense. But everyone who comes back to it scientifically finds a little more evidence that it's real. And at the end of the day, as a physician, for my critically ill patients, I really care tremendously about the quality of their remaining life as well as the duration. And if this allows them, in the sense of the lady who described her husband listening to WQXR and reading the New York Times, if this buys my patient more time and more energy and is physiologically better to enjoy more days in their remaining life, then the science may come after the fact. But I think that it's not expensive, it's very powerful, it is a link for both patients and family, and I think we just need to keep working on this in all kinds of different venues. But I think that Andrews taught us that the prescription, the patient-oriented prescription, and the empathy are a key part of this. This is much more than just videos and tapes, and he's really to be commended for what he's added as a non-scientist to our clinical discipline and critical care.
Last question?
Okay.
This is a very different kind of question, and I'm sorry I can't ask it in a different way, but I'm just wondering, Andrew, if you were ever a student at Stony Brook University.
What year were you there?
In the early 70s? And you did.
There aren't any children involved in this question, right?
And do you remember Andy
I
Vallanil?
remember.
The trio Andy Vallanil?
I don't remember that, but I ran the independent study program.
Oh, yeah. The last 2 years. You ran it?
I ran it, you knew me.
You guys
I sure did.
You guys can hook up later.
Yeah.
Andrew's going to love
God bless you. You gave me you allowed me to have a wonderful final year. I only did independent study, okay. Let me tell you something very briefly. That I remember back then a lot of students would get that. It was an easy way to. That was a crucial element to my having a lifelong career in music. The independent study program I did with Richard Dyer Bennett as my main sponsor, and the English professor Tom Kranitas was the co-sponsor. And thank you so much that you were involved, that you allowed that to happen. because it's one of the most important things in my education. Big hand for
How about we thank you for our guests? Thank you so much.
Thank you all for staying, and Andrew's going to play for us now, so please stay.
Andrew is going to play for you. Do not miss this.
And I was wrong about one
I
thing.
have it on a high authority. It saves lives.
String guitar, not 12.
Yeah, right, exactly. Oh, darn it. I'm so disappointed you caught it. I was gonna nail you. I had a great line all set up.
Yours must be 3 years ago. Since 94.
Get the joke, the entertainer? From the other movie? Actually, I want to make a point. It was so interesting that the teacher drops dead, right? That was the piece, right? She dies. Let me tell you how, I'm not going to tell you the story, or I'm going to speak very briefly, but being a critical care musician is the most wonderful experience I've ever had, and it is extremely intense and potentially great danger, because music can save, and if it's the wrong music, I have never killed anybody. In 5 years, I had one experience. It's a great story, and you'll have to buy my book in a year to read the story. But it was the most scared I ever was in my life with one patient, and I played 4 different things, and then started to get up because I was really afraid that I was potentially going to give her a stroke. She was in a coma. And I had an inspiration as I was standing of what the right music was, and I did it, and I took a blood pressure from 175 to 135 in about 10 minutes. It's a great story, and I'm not saying this because I'm trying to do a hard sell on my book. Well, maybe I am. A key reason why I was allowed to play in the SICU is I gave Dr. McMillan, when I was leaving the hospital, my wife and I gave him one of my CDs. And there was a particular piece on it that he loved, and that was a big factor. He's a history guy. He studied history in college. And this is a piece that was written by one of the most famous English musicians of all time. It was written during the second decade of the second Elizabethan period. And Marvin loved this piece, and it was a factor of why he let me do this. He was one of the great musicians. Interesting sideline is, I did some research on him. He was, of all things, he was also a sun worshiper. giveaway, of course, was the second Elizabethan period, and a sun worship. Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. I'm going to play two more pieces. I can talk for quite a long time about what music and prescriptive music and what works, and it's such an interesting thing. And there is no default music that you do. You have to go to that patient, to that bedside, and watch. You watch the hands, the feet, the face, the computer monitor. Most people are out. Occasionally, you get somebody who's doing pretty good, and they'll go, "Do you know any Elvis?" You know, okay, that's easy. But mostly, it's very, very hard. There are three bodies of work. One of them, the Beatles' music, is just extraordinary of how that lifts people. Yeah, it's really one of the extraordinary. And that particular piece, Here Comes the Sun by George Harrison, lights up the whole room all the time. I'll play a very short Bach. Bach is one of the other great musics, and especially in comas. If you play deep Bach fugues and really the profound Bach music, it's amazing what you watch and see. Saving a life, by the way, is extremely rare. It's a very narrow set of factors. I won't even go into that, we don't have the time. But healing, speeding the healing process and moving people forward, that is, I can tell you, something that just happens all the time, happens constantly. This is something I played a little bit of in the movie, and it's from the St. Matthew Passion, the famous chorale melody from that piece.